Your courtship pedigree just went through the roof, Luke, with that photo. I'm going to have emails from all the 18-year-old girls going, who is that Luke Tanner? Sorry, DMs from 18-year-old girls. Okay, so I've got a huge amount of stuff to share with you here, but I'm going to try and not share it all because it'll take too long. But just trying to get my notes, sorry. So what I want to look at this morning is a little bit about, we've been talking a bit about Christian worldviews, we've been talking a little bit about defending our faith, and as I mentioned last night, probably where the difference between us and them, the world and Christianity, a worldview of evolution and naturalism and do whatever you want, and the Christianity of, you know, sexual morality and standards and a way of living, you know, probably the starkness of the two different thoughts or the two different worldviews becomes most prominent in this whole area of sex, marriage, gender, family. So this is going to be the most difficult area. Sometimes I ask myself, you know, why is this so difficult for us in the church? Why do so many young adults screw up in this area? And part of the reason is because this is the most attacked area. This is the area where if you want to be a young adult Christian, you're going to have the most temptation, you're going to have the most attack, you're going to have the enemy come at you the most. Because if he can break you in this sexual area and he can distort you and mess you up in this area, then it messes up everything else in your life. Really hurts everything else in your life. So sex God. Does sex and stuff really matter to God? How did we get here? How do we get to this place of a sex-crazed world where everything is sexualized, everything is about sex? We've got things like Tinder, dating sites. We've got things like, what's the one that Ashley Madison, which is the dating site where you can have an affair, you can meet someone who also wants to have an affair. You had all these kind of crazy things going on. Do we have the picture of, oh, what happened to the picture of Dan Blazarian? I had a picture of Dan Blazarian there. Have you heard of him? He's a self-proclaimed king of Instagram. He's got about 25 million followers, and Dan Blazarian has kind of hit the jackpot, so to speak, in the worldly sense. He's got money, lots of money, millions and millions and millions of dollars. He won it by playing poker. He's like a poker shark and won all his money. He's got millions and millions and millions of dollars. He's got power, 25 million followers on Instagram, and all of his posts are basically guns, cars, and girls. And he's got the third thing. You've got power, you've got money, and then you've got sex, or for him, you've got girls. And he throws what he's really famous for and what he really became famous for is using all his money and all his power. He throws these parties where him and about 7 or 8 of his mates come over to his multi-million-dollar mansion, and then he pays about 200 good-looking girls, like in the photo there, to come to these parties. So 10 guys, 200 girls. They all have about 20 girls each, and then they just have sex with them and do whatever and party all night, and that's what he kind of became famous for. So in the eyes of the world, Dan Blazarian is kind of the sex god. He's made it. He's kind of become God in this area. He's got the money, he's got the house, he's got cars, he's got guns, and he's got sex on tap at any time he wants. Tinder has become a kind of morphed from what was a dating site or a way of using the internet to meet people online, a new way of dating, and then things like Tinder have now come that are kind of shrouded in this same kind of dating site type terminology, but they really become about hookups, about meeting people that you can have sex with. And a lot of people use Tinder because they know that I can probably hook up with someone or take someone out, and I'm probably, it's going to cost me dinner. Maybe I pay for dinner, but I'm going to get sex after, and people can go looking for each other with a horrible way of working out who you want to hang out with or who you want to date. You swipe away the ugly people. Which way is ugly or which way is not like? Left, I think. And if I like the look of them, I swipe right. So all the ones you swipe left disappear off your Tinder, and all the girls or guys you swipe right, they stay on. And then eventually, if someone swiped right for you as well, then Tinder tells you you've got a match. There's almost 2 billion people who use Tinder every day, and Tinder makes something like 25 million matches a day with people. But Tinder really has just capitalized on the whole hookup culture that we live in. So basically, sex and relationships have got to this point where everything now is just about the hookup. Now, what is a hookup? I mean, young adults and young people beautifully have characterized the hookup as something that's basically undescribable. It can be anything from a little kiss at a party with some girl or some guy, to having friends with benefits, some person, some sex buddy that you have sex with and you just hook up. There's no relationship, there's no feelings, there's no marriage, there's no responsibility. It's just about sex and purely physical. So the hookup is this kind of obscure word that kind of defines anything to do with kind of anything in the area of sex or relationships between a girl and a guy, or between a guy and a guy, or a girl. Basically, whatever you want it to be is a hookup. And it's a good word because if you say I hooked up with someone, it sounds cool, but it could just be a little kiss, but you can kind of angle it as I hooked up. And all your mates think you've had sex with like 10 different women over the weekend. So people use it to kind of build their notoriety and their, display some kind of sexual kind of accomplishment, but really it may not be that at all. But who knows what hookup is? It's just this culture that has originated, which basically means there's no rules and there's no boundaries and there's no morality and there's no purpose for sex or relationships or these things. Fueled by pornography. This is probably the main problem, is that there's this fuel that happens that fuels this hookup culture, fuels this culture of promiscuity, and that's pornography. So for the first time ever in the history of the universe, you now have little boys and little girls who consume or have observed and have watched hundreds or thousands of people having sex, often hardcore, violent, perverted sex, not the kind of sex that normal people have. And they've consumed a huge amount and observed a huge amount of sex ever before even losing their virginity. It's pretty weird. So you can get these 15, 16-year-old kids who have watched pornography for 5 hours a day for the last few years of their life, and they haven't even lost their own virginity. So the first time they ever engage in kissing or sex or anything like that, they've got hundreds and hundreds of hours of pictures and videos and files in their head of all this pornography that they've watched themselves. And basically 99% of 16, 17-year-olds have already seen pornography. 80% of pornography is abusive or violent towards women. So it's sex with a woman having her head held in a toilet, or sex with a woman pulling on her hair, or sex with a woman where the guy is dominating her physically. I think 80 to 90% of pornography is that kind of. So it's not normal. And the people having the pornography sex often don't have normal bodies. They have bodies full of, they've had implants, they've had unrealistic bodies, hairless bodies, things that just aren't normal. So kids can consume all of this and get this picture of what sex is before they've had sex, and it's not even close to what normal sex looks like. And this is fueling a hookup culture and a sexually promiscuous culture where something like friends with benefits is something to be prized or is something to attain to. To be able to have a friend that you can have sex with where you don't have any responsibility to one another, you don't have to put anything into a relationship, you don't have to spend any money on them, you don't have to call them back, you don't have to do anything, but to have someone you can have regular sex or sexual encounters with is kind of prized or idolized as the most ultimate kind of place to get to. You know what all this sounds like? It's exactly the same as first century Corinth. So let's go all the way back 2,000 years ago. You have basically the same culture in Corinth, and the Apostle Paul writes 2 letters, 1 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians, to this church who's in this city of Corinth, who live in a sexually saturated society. So don't feel like we've never been here before. Don't ever look at the world and go like, this is the worst it's ever been. It's not. The world has been exactly like this for a long, long time. So the city of Corinth was kind of between Rome and Turkey, and it was a trade city with many religions, and it was sexually promiscuous, sexually loose. The Greeks who lived there, because a Greek city, supported sexual immorality. They weren't against sexual immorality like the Jews were or the new Christians on the scene were. They had temple prostitutes. So if you wanted to worship God, you would go up to the temple and you'd have sex with a prostitute. So having sex with a prostitute was seen as an act of worship and was something encouraged. The Greeks would use boys for sex or slaves for sex at free will whenever they wanted to. Often a lot of Greek men or even Roman men would have a boy that they would have sex with, and it was almost seen as a mentorship or an apprenticeship, and then they would also have a wife, but wives were more used for babies and children and to raise a family. Infanticide and even abortion was rife. Babies that were not wanted would often be, obviously they didn't have the technology of today, so often babies would go full term, but then once the baby was born, they would just put the baby in the rubbish, or they would take it out to the field and it would cry for a day and then it would die. And usually they were female babies because males were seen as superior in that culture. So if you had a female baby, they would often be discarded because you'd want to have a male baby. So what the problem is there is give it a few decades time, and you get a society full of men wanting to have sex and get married and very few women. So you had in that society at that time, most men would have sex like today and do what they wanted until they're in their late 20s or 30, and then they would marry an 18-year-old and have a family. Sounds pretty similar to today. It was encouraged to go and visit prostitutes, and even free women in Greek culture would become prostitutes. So married women or even free women who were of the elite and the upper class would become prostitutes. And very interestingly, they used to call these women that would kind of cruise around the upper elite and have sex with different men, they used to call these women friends. Isn't that interesting? That was the little nickname that they gave to these women. They didn't call them prostitutes, they called them friends. And they would go around. With the Romans, wife stealing or adultery was very common among the elites, and they would often be cheating on one another. So it makes a lot of sense when we come to 1 Corinthians. I don't think I have it there. Yes, I do have it there. It makes a lot of sense. We come to 1 Corinthians. Paul is writing to this church in this city, in this culture, and he says to them, do you not know that your bodies are members of Christ himself? So Paul's talking about your real body, your real physical body. Shall I then take this member of Christ himself, my body, and unite them with the prostitute? So when it's talking about a prostitute, it's talking about the temple prostitutes, or it's talking about these Roman friend women prostitutes and going and just joining yourself with anyone or anything at any time. Never. Do you not know that he who unites himself with the prostitute is one with her in body? For it is said the two will become one flesh. And Paul affirms what we know all the way back from Genesis 2:24, that a man and a woman become one. They become one flesh when they get involved sexually. When a male and a female get involved sexually, it's the process of two bodies literally becoming as one body. And that's God's design. That's how God's designed it. So Paul's writing to this church going, don't fool around with your body. Don't touch someone else's body. Don't let someone else touch your body until you come into the covenant of marriage, and that's the place for sexual activity. Outside of that, don't go joining yourself with people who aren't your husband or aren't your wife. Now, we know the Bible pretty clearly, and I don't want to focus on that hugely today. You've heard me speak a lot about that, but just very quickly, the Bible's pretty clear on the sexual standards for Christians. We have 10 commandments in the 10 commandments, and the 7th one is don't commit adultery. Pretty short and sweet and to the point, but everything about sex, relationships, boys, girls, gender, marriage, everything is in those few words, do not commit adultery. Because once you begin to unpack it, you see that all the principles are in there. What do you do before marriage? How do you treat the opposite sex? What about sex? What does God believe about sex? Well, it's all tied up in do not commit adultery, which is really don't have sex outside of marriage. If you're going to marry the person, that's fine. Don't have sex until you're married. If you're not going to marry the person, don't have sex. Don't have sex with someone else's wife if they're already married, or someone else's husband. It's all covered there. But a man who commits adultery has no sense. You fool around physically, you touch someone else's wife or someone else's future wife. You know, it doesn't matter that Michaela's not married now. She's still somebody's wife. She will marry one day, and she will officially in front of everyone become that man's wife. But at the moment, she still belongs to that man in the eyes of God. So you have no right to touch her or to go near her inappropriately, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, or otherwise. So adultery is sex with not your wife. Jesus reaffirms this thing. So you can't say, well, that's just the Old Testament, Pastor Caleb, that's the Jewish laws. Well, Jesus himself says, you have heard it said, you shall not commit adultery. So he affirms the Old Testament. That's why anything said in the New Testament referring to the Old is very important, because it brings it into the New Covenant. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So in the New Covenant or the New Testament, adultery is not only a physical act. So it's not just about, Old Testament was like, keep it in your pants. If you can just not do the physical thing, you're okay. Just wait. The New Testament is like, it's not just about keeping it in your pants and keeping it physically distant. It's also in your heart. It's also in your heart. So what does that mean, in your heart? Do not look at a woman lustfully. Do not commit adultery in your heart. Well, it means if you're a young lady and you look at a guy and begin dreaming of the future, begin dreaming of marriage, dreaming of getting sexually involved with him, you know, needing a man to affirm your beauty or make you feel good about yourself, anything in that area is lust. Your motive is to use a guy or a picture of a guy or a friend with a guy or anything like that to make yourself feel good, or a boyfriend for that matter, to make yourself feel good, feel okay, feel loved, feel worthy, whatever that is, that's lust. So any motive in your heart that is wrong towards the opposite sex is lust, and you've committed adultery. So guess what? All of us here have committed adultery in our heart, me included. And it's a daily battle for me included. It's a daily battle for me to not look at a woman and look at her breasts or look at her backside or to think about her in a sexual way. I don't do that automatically. I have to try, I have to pray, I have to grow. It's not easy to do that. It's not easy to surf the internet and not come across that. It's not easy to go down the beach. I like a good-looking woman in a bikini. That's always going to make me feel good. I'm always going to be attracted to that. My eyes are always going to turn in that direction. I'm wired that way by God to look at that. And guess what? You go down the beach and women don't wear much these days. And it seems to be getting less somehow. If that's even possible, it's getting less and less. And I'm always going to look at that, and I'm always going to have to check my heart. I'm always going to have to watch my motive, and I'm always going to get it wrong and have to improve in that area. So there's no point worrying about trying to be good at this, because you all have stuffed up in this and you will stuff up in that. So we're not kind of putting some sexual standard there that's meant to put pressure on you and, I'm never going to attain to that. What Jesus says there puts us all in the sinner's box. Puts us all in the, it's not about, I didn't have sex till I got married, so I'm okay. It's like, well, if you even look at someone in your heart with the wrong motive or the wrong thought, you've sinned. Oh, great, we're all done there. So Jesus puts a standard so high that no one's going to be able to attain to that. So it's not about perfection or performance. What's Jesus trying to say? He's trying to say your heart is really important. Repentance is really important. Learning and growing is really important. When you do get married, do it right. Get there the right way. These things are really important, and they do matter what goes on in your heart, what thoughts you think in your mind. The Bible clearly states that sex before marriage is wrong and is a sin, even if it's the person you're going to marry. But since sexual immorality is occurring, each man should have sexual relations with his own wife, and each woman with her own husband. But if they cannot control themselves, they should marry, for it is better to marry than to burn with passion. There's no need to burn with passion. There's no need to try and shut down your sexual desire. You'll never be able to shut down your sexual desire. God has given you that sexual desire. Don't ask God to take it away, because he won't. You're always going to be interested in the opposite sex. You're always going to want to get married. You're always going to want to have sexual relations. That's normal. But the Bible clearly states and implies very strongly, if you want to read the key scriptures, 1 Corinthians chapter 5, 1 Corinthians chapter 6, 1 Corinthians chapter 7, will give you 3 chunky chapters of Paul speaking into a culture of Corinth that is very similar to ours and goes through all the different things. Now, not everything is like do this, do this, do this, do this, but if you read what Paul's saying, you can get the implication of what the Christian standard is. And like you can see in these 2 verses, it's very obvious you shouldn't be sleeping with someone else's wife, and then you also shouldn't be fooling around before marriage, but then you also shouldn't be fooling around and then just trying to not fool around and then just try to not fool around with the next girl. If you burn with passion, if you like someone, if you love someone, we'll explore the possibility of marrying her and actually make it official. Don't just go from one girl to the next, one porn thing to the next, one struggle to the next. Well, if there's someone you like and they like you, take steps towards marrying them. The Bible clearly states that Christians should abstain from sexual immorality, or in the old versions we used to call this fornication, but it's the same Greek word, sexual immorality, fornication. Fornication's a little bit of an old school word, but basically it means sex outside of marriage. And also, Paul is very clear that in the church you should not hang out with or associate with sexually immoral people. So people are screwing up in this area and they don't want to change, and they want to keep screwing up sexually, and they want to keep fooling around, but they want to keep coming to church and they want to keep being a Christian. Paul is very clear, don't hang out with them, and he even says, get them out of the church. So this is a very serious matter. Sex and stuff does matter to God. It's at the core of our creation. As a human being is our sexuality, and it does matter to God what we do with it, yet we live in a society, in a world that says it absolutely does not matter what you do with your body or your sexuality. We live in a very, very opposite type culture. So why do Christians so often get caught in the middle of Corinth and sexual purity, the middle of the culture and all the sexual liberation and Christianity and what the Bible says? Why do we often get caught? Why do we often get torn? We want to stay clean. We want to wait for our wife. We want to do it right. But then there's this other side of us that messes up and watches porn again and fools around and makes these mistakes. I think something that doesn't help is living in a society that's so sexually fueled and sex is so easily accessible. You can watch sex anywhere at any time on your smartphone. All you need is the internet. It's so accessible more than ever before. You don't have to go looking for pornography. Pornography is already looking for you, and it will find you unless you are vigilant and you're already ready that it's going to come at you. We live in a sex-fueled society. We're designed for sex. That's why this is hard. Many, many men, young men have grown up in the church going, what is wrong with me? Why does my mind work like this? Why do my eyes wander there? Why do I want to have sex so bad? many women grow up with that same physical drive, and it's difficult. Often women, it tends to not be as strong a physical drive, although you can have women with a stronger sex drive than some men and that. But just generally speaking, men tend to have a stronger, more forceful, gorilla-like sex drive. Women tend to be more swept off their feet or give their heart or fall in love when there's communication and when there's showing romance and when there's talking and when there's telling them that they're special. That tends to get them thinking about the future or not in the right way. But we're designed for sex. If you touch yourself or someone else in a sexual way, that will lead to sexual arousal. If you keep doing things that arouse you sexually with someone else, that will lead to sexual intercourse. It's a pretty simple 3-step process. God designed it that way. So let's just simplify it for a moment. It's a pretty simple 3-step process. You think about sex, and then you got someone that you can touch and they want to touch you in a sexual way. There's going to be arousal, and the whole point of arousal is to have sexual intercourse. So the key is to not get involved in that process. Don't start that process. Don't head in that direction. Don't push those boundaries. Don't put yourself in a dark place late at night with someone that you like and then start touching one another, because you'll end up heading in that direction. That's why this is hard, because we're designed this way and we want to have sex, and you're going to be attracted to a pretty girl and you're going to want to be around her. It's normal. But the Christian is called to be patient and wait for the right time. There's nothing in Christianity that says no. It just says wait for the right time. In the world, there's nothing that says no or wait for the right time. It says whatever time, whatever the consequences, with whoever's available, and it leads to a big fat mess. The other reason why people get caught is because sin is a problem. And when sin is a problem, we fall sexually into sexual sin. We look for a story. We look for a justification. We look to deny that it was that bad. We point the finger to blame someone else who put us there. We blame the world, a society, devil, the media. We point to science. It's normal for people to want to have sex. We offer every excuse imaginable, because this is what sin does, and sexual sin does. It separates us from the truth. And people fall into sin, and then they fall into a story and a justification, an excuse, which just makes it worse. If you're really sorry, say sorry, move on, grow through it. The minute you start with excuses and hiding and trying to deny and blame, it's just going to make it worse. God created, on the left there, God created in the beginning gender. He institutes marriage, sex, sexual intercourse, and then children as a natural result of all of that. Now, God creates these things and he joins them together. So if you want some references, Genesis 1:27, he created them male and female. There's 2 genders. There's no more than 2. There's not 3, there's not 1, and there's not 17. There's 2. And this may sound crazy, but your gender actually aligns to the genitals that you have between your legs. It's not a feeling. It's not something you can just create. Your biology and the body that God has given you was a sign to show that you're a male or a female. Now, my 3 children have worked that out pretty quick. It took them till about 2 years old to work out boys and girls. Okay? Genesis 1:27, it's there at the beginning. Marriage isn't there. Genesis 2:24, for this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife. The 2 will become one. So that's sex, the 2 becoming one. A man will leave his family he grew up in, and a woman will leave her family she grew up in, and they will become another family. There's no dating. There's no run around in my 20s, do my own thing. There's mum and dad and me and my family, and then there's leaving and uniting with a woman and creating a new family. There's no intermediate period. Do you realize dating is a very modern concept? It's only the last 50, 60 years that dating has ever existed. We've never had dating in the history of humanity. We've never had anything called dating. The only reason we have dating is because in the 1950s and 60s, young people began to be able to drive cars. People had the money in places like Australia to buy cars. Are we okay? Oh, that's not this. Oh, wow. Really onto a hot topic. You have to understand this. Dating is a modern concept. So we had cars. We had the money to buy cars. You didn't have to work on the farm at 4 in the morning anymore. And as a kid, you had to go out and milk the cow and bring the horses in and do all of that. As society became more urbanised, people moved to the cities. Mum and Dad now had a job that made a lot of money, so they could give you some money to go to the movies on a Friday night. You could drive to the movies on a Friday night. So things started to change. And in the 50s and the 60s, as things were becoming easier and technology was advancing and people had money and kids could actually get away from their family. See, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife. But now I can get away and do my own thing. I can go to the movies, I can drive, I can go on a trip, I can live on my own. Children never ever thought of living on their own ever before in history. It wasn't financially possible, it wasn't practical, and most families lived on a farm in one house and probably slept in one room. Now all of a sudden we've got multiple rooms and, you know, I'll go do university in this city and I'll move out into my own house with my girlfriend. And we didn't even have the money to do these kind of things. There wasn't the resources, the food, anything. So it's a very modern concept. It's created this whole dating thing. This whole dating thing where we can get away from our family and do our own thing, where God's design was you'll go from your family and then create your own family. Does that make sense? In Genesis 1:28, God says to Adam and Eve, who he created, male and female, multiply, fill the earth. And part of that is he meant literally multiply, procreate, have babies, make a human race. So God put these 4 things together. What happens is when man or self begins to play around with marriage and children and sex and gender, is it breaks these things apart. It severs the link between these things. See, God joined all these things together. Gender had a purpose. You need a man and a woman to have sex. That's how God created it. You know, the man bits fit with the female bits. It all goes together. It's pretty obvious, okay? It's like when you plug your phone into a socket at night to charge it. You need an electrical socket and then you got a plug, all right? They go together. That's like a man and a woman. They go together. It's biologically obvious. Not only are you emotionally or spiritually complementary between a man and a woman, but physically you complement one another. And then there's a pretty obvious sign that this is meant to happen. We can actually create a baby. A real human life can happen when a man and a woman come together sexually. So it's kind of an obvious sign that this is meant to happen and that man and woman are meant to go together, not man and man or woman and woman. But the idea was that the marriage bit would create a covenant that 2 people would be committed, and then that sexual activity would happen within that committed relationship, so that when that committed relationship of the man and the woman produces a child, that child could then be raised and trained and taught how to live by a mum, a woman, and a father, a man, and that those parents have committed to stay together till death do us part in a marriage, so that child has a peaceful childhood, a secure childhood, and a great home to grow up in, to be trained in, so that they know how to be an adult once they get to adulthood themselves, and they leave their father and mother's home and then are united to their wife, and the cycle starts again. What the world has done is it ripped all this apart and made it all isolated. Sex has nothing to do with gender. Sex has nothing to do with marriage, and sex has nothing to do with children. It's its standalone thing. Marriage has nothing to do with sex. It's just a relationship you can get into whenever you want. Marriage has nothing to do with children. I don't have to have children. And if I can't have children and I want to have a baby, well, that's a human right that I have a baby. So we need IVF and we need other ways to get me a child. If I'm a single woman and I want to have a child, well, someone can donate some sperm and I can have a child, because we've taken the connection of children away from marriage and sex and gender, and we've made children its own thing. So we're a gay couple, neither of us have a womb, but we want to have a child. It's a human right that we have a child. Children has nothing to do with my sexuality, nothing to do with my gender, nothing to do with marriage. There are other things and other activities I do. We're two gay men and we want to have a child. So it's our right to have a child, and now you're starting to get this increase more and more and more, because we've disconnected these four things from one another. People who can't even have children now are seeking to get children, because they're so unlinked from one another. The sexual revolution gave rise to sex as God, and its followers created in the image of a sex god. That you become God, you become a sex goddess, you become someone who is liberated and free to explore your own sexual desires. Don't worry about things like marriage and what religion and churches say, or social taboos, or what your parents think, or what some school told you. Like, you be free to be the center of the universe. You be free to be the God of sex. And don't worry about that God who created sex and actually has a purpose for it. There's a lot of information in these slides. If you want to take a picture of it or want to get the slides, you can. I just thought I'd put all the information in there. I'm not going to go through it all. So if you want to take a picture as I quickly skip through these, do that, and you can have a little bit look later. But I'm just comparing the biblical worldview and what God says with what the world says. So we say that gender is complementary. That was back there. But the world says that gender is whatever you want it to be. We say that marriage is actually a covenant and it's a commitment till death do us part, and that a man and a woman is what makes a marriage because they're complementary. The world says marriage is just a human idea and a social construct, and therefore we can define it however we want. If we want to call marriage man and man, woman and woman, man and woman, it doesn't matter, and who has a right to say that it matters. You see, when you underpin sexuality with evolution, then it totally loses all purpose. So you guys know all the Bible stuff, right? Let's jump on the other side, okay? So Big Bang happened. Out of that Big Bang, there was a primordial soup of amino acids and proteins, and then they kind of clicked together and sparked and bubbled off one another, and this little slug kind of crawled out of this primordial soup and began to evolve. Eventually it evolved into a small insect, and eventually it grew into a little animal, and that became a mammal, and then that became a monkey, and then eventually after millions and millions of years we've got a human being. Now that human being has a capability to have sex. That human being apparently has a particular gender. That human being is mostly attracted to, well, I'm a male, attracted to a female. But if I came out of soup, a primordial soup and a Big Bang, and then I used to be my cousin or my uncle or my forefathers were monkeys, then why would I follow what the church says about sex and gender? Why would I follow what society or the law or the government says about me having sex and my gender or who I have sex with? There is no law, there is no rule, there is no purpose. We're just a result of evolution. So every sexual standard or morality or social taboo is all just created by human beings. And the worst perpetrators are the church and religious people who just put rules on us to oppress our animal instincts and our sexuality and our freedom to be sexually liberated and do what we want to do. Is this making sense to you? It really matters where you came from and the origins of the human race. And it really matters that you as a Christian understand that. Why should you follow what Jesus said in the Bible and not have sex before marriage and then do courtship and marry someone and honor a woman? Why should you do that? Well, it's not because I say, and it's not even because Jesus said. You can go even further back. If God spoke you into being, created you male and female, formed you out of the dust of the earth, and he gave you a sex drive, and he said that a man and a woman should be together, and he said there is male and female, they're the two genders. And if he says there's a purpose for sex and a purpose for marriage, and that children are important and innocent and should be raised in the most safe environment possible, then if God said all of that, then all of a sudden it makes sense that there's standards and better ways than other ways, and that Jesus encouraged us to live a certain way. And Paul wrote to the church of Corinth and said, hey, don't live like everyone out in the world. This is the standards. It makes sense because God spoke it, God ordained it, God designed it. So then God knows how sex, marriage, relationships, family, he knows how it works best because he's the architect, the designer, the creator. He put it all together. You do it outside of God, and all you're going to get is hurt and pain. Of course, sex feels good when you're doing it. Of course it does. It's designed by God to be pleasurable, to be enjoyable. If it didn't feel good, you wouldn't keep going back again, and then we wouldn't get enough babies to replace the people dying, okay? God set it up so that we keep reproducing. Of course it feels good at the time. But sex takes not very long at all, for one. But you do it outside of God's design, and the pain of that sexual encounter will follow you for decades. Most people are followed by the pain and the hurt of their sexual encounters decade in, decade out. It affects them. It affects the way they see the world. It causes them deep pain, what people have done to them, what they've done to people. No prostitute wakes up and goes, oh, thank God I've had sex with 1,500 men the last few years. I just feel so at peace. I've really enjoyed that. They don't have life-giving lives. They don't have phenomenal careers. They don't go on to become the people in society like a stateswoman that everyone wants to attain and model their life after. That doesn't happen. They're not thankful. You don't see videos on the internet of prostitutes that are so thankful that have had so much sex. It's brought them so much peace and liberation and freedom. And thank God I didn't listen to all the stuff I learned in church as a kid and I just went and had as much sex as possible. That has really worked out well for me. No one's ever said that. No one's ever said, oh, it was awesome having 50 sexual partners before I got married. Really helped my marriage. It's like made me a better communicator, a better father. It's matured me as a person. No one's ever said that. But a lot of people have said, well, I waited till I got married to have sex, and it built character in me, and I did become a better father, and I honoured women more because I actually worked hard at honouring them and not just pulling them down in my mind and watching pornography and treating women as negotiable. It did affect me, and it did help me become the man who I am today. And because of that, I'm not only a father to my children, but I can be a father to other people. And women trust me because they can see within me there's not a whole sexual, yucky thing in there, that I'm clean and that I treat them right. And lots of people have said that. And I spoke a bit about children already. God has designed them to be with a mother and a father, a male and a female. That's what's best. The trinity of father, mother, child is powerful. Where the world, it's optional. A baby's just an inconvenience. If you've had sex and accidentally get pregnant, well, you can just abort it. Killing a baby in the womb is seen as a health benefit. It's seen as a medical requirement that everyone has the right to. A woman's rights to her body trump the life of a human on the inside of her. And the traditional family of being tied to one wife is seen as something to be escaped and run away from. Of course it is if a couple of million years ago your father was a monkey. Why would you stay with your wife if you want to go have sex with someone else who's prettier and younger? Of course you would. What's holding you to that woman? Nothing. There's no God. There's no heaven. There's no afterlife. My children will be okay. It doesn't matter what I do. I have a right to divorce my wife and leave my children and go live with someone else. There is no standards. There is no God. The Bible is just something that Christians made up to sexually oppress the rest of the world. Our redemption comes through Jesus Christ. The world's redemption, and this is growing only stronger and stronger and stronger, comes through sexual liberation. The world is offering people redemption through sex or salvation through sex. Now, I won't get too deep into this because there's so much. But sex in our society has replaced God. It's become a source of meaning. It's become a source of identity. That's why the LGBT movement is becoming more and more powerful, because for them, who they have sex with is their entire identity. That's who they are as a person. So when that is who you have sex with and how you have sex becomes your whole identity, then you have to make that okay, and you have to lobby until everyone else thinks that's okay. And you have to tell yourself over and over again that that's okay, that who I have sex with is my whole being. You can't let anyone attack that, because they attack your sexuality, then they attack who you very are as a person. It's become a place of healing. It's seen as a place of redemption. If I can just have sex with the right person, if I can just have sex without feeling guilty, if I can deal with all the things like the churches and parents and governments and all these things that, people have made up to control me and oppress my sexuality, if I can get rid of all these things and we can just create this society that's this like utopia of sexual freedom, and everyone can have sex with who they want, when they want, any way they want, then if we can just have that freedom, we'll all be happy. We'll all be healed. All we need is love. That's what the whole sexual revolution was built on. And the Beatles wrote one of the most famous songs ever, All We Need Is Love. That's exactly what that song was saying. If we just can have sex with whoever we want and love who we want, and our parents and our churches and our government stop telling us what to do, then there's going to be peace and everyone's going to be happy and we're going to be saved. We're not going to worry anymore. There's not going to be pain anymore. It's salvation through sex rather than through Jesus Christ. And sex is kind of promoted as the next level or the next dimension of human progress. Because we're evolving. There's no God. There's no creator. We're evolving. We're building our own Tower of Babel, our own sexual freedom tower that says to the world that we're evolving as a human race. If a man wants to have sex with a man, that's evolution, that's progress, that's freedom. Let's get rid of all the people who say that that's wrong, because they're standing in the road of us moving forward as a human race. It's liberation. It's not just man and a woman, it's man and a man, it's woman as a woman. Look, everyone's happy now. We're liberated. No one can tell us what to do with our sexuality. We're moving forward. We're evolving. So sex is put there as, well, if we can do more of it and better of it and different ways and with weirder styles, then we're going to be more progressive as a human race. And then in the 1960s, with the sexual revolution built on the psychologist Freud and the study of Alfred Kinsey and Margaret Singer and these kind of people, they brought all the science and the psychology to say, yes, it is okay. Science does back all of your weird sexual fantasies that you want to have. And you know what all of these people, these scientists and psychologists, you know what they hated the most, what they attacked the most, what they gave their whole life to fight against? It was against this belief in God, the moral sexual teachings of the Bible, and the church and the people of the church who upheld these things. They constantly attacked, saying that what they had was science supporting sexual liberation, and what the church offered was just tradition and like old fuddy-duddy stuff trying to oppress us and stop us from having fun. They constantly worked against church, but really they were working against God and wanting to work against what He had set up. As I'm finishing, can we just get those bowls out? As I'm finishing, this is the challenge for you guys, for us. This is the cultural challenge as we go out into all the world. There's a cosmic battle between sexual liberation and sexual discipleship. Christianity says grow. The world says give in and just follow your desires. You know, I grew up with a rock song. I might be showing my age here, but I grew up with a rock song that said, "You and me, baby, are nothing but mammals. So let's do it like they do on the Discovery Channel." Does anyone remember that song? You and me, baby, ain't nothing but mammals, so let's do it like they do on the Discovery Channel. It's actually a brilliant lyric because it completely captures the worldly point of view of sex. We just evolved from, this was Alfred Kinsey's whole scientific kind of angle was, we've just evolved from animals, so we should look at what animals do with sex so that we know what to do with sex. Oh, they just have it whenever they need to. There's no marriage or relationship or commitment. Animals just have sex whenever they want, supposedly. And that was kind of the model. And that's the lyric of the song. We're just mammals. We're just evolved. It's just, let's just do it whenever we want, like they do on the Discovery Channel. Doesn't matter who's watching. It doesn't matter what it looks like. It doesn't matter who we are. It's just you and me, baby. There's no God. There's no Bible. There's no afterlife. There's no standard. It doesn't matter about children. We can just abort them. It doesn't matter if we have a kid or we want it, don't want it, want to raise it well, There's no rules. We're just mammals. We're just animals. This is random. Sex is random. Sexuality is random. There's no designer, purpose, thought. There's no God who thought something about this. Let me give you, while I'm on it, let me give you 3 P's quickly for why God. You might be thinking, well, okay, well, why, Pastor Caleb? Why sex then? Why did God come up with this? You know, like the first one, for pleasure. Sex is a gift. It feels good, it's fun, but only when it's done in the right way. My sexual relationship with Zoe has only got better and better and better over the 8 years we've been married. Why? Because we're not having sex with other people. We're not inviting a third person into our bedroom, because we're together and we're secure and we love each other and we're not looking elsewhere and we're growing together in our marriage. So because of those things, our sex gets better. It's not because we're watching porn, trying new techniques, having weird sex, inviting other people in. That doesn't make sex better. You, as you get better as a couple, learn to talk better, learn about each other better, learn each other's hearts better. It makes you fulfilled in every area of your life. And that's the pleasure of sex. It's not only in the physical act, but it's also the emotional, the spiritual, the security. It's very securing for a woman to have a man who only looks at her, and if he does look somewhere else, he gets his heart right and focuses on her and loves her and lays down his life for her and for the children and for the family and fears God and has other men speaking into his life, keeping him clean. That is the most securing thing you could ever have, women. Why you would go chasing some boy out there in the world is so far beyond me. Sorry to raise my voice, but man, if I had $1 for every time that some silly 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old girl who grew up in the church, has great Christian parents, has been taught all the ins and outs of why it's not good out there, ran off with the first little pimpled-faced boy at school who says, "I love you, I think you're cute," and then gives 2, 3, 4 years of her life to this relationship, gives her virginity, gives everything to him. He realizes at 20, 21, 22, there's heaps of other girls out there beyond my high school, and this one I went to school with drops her and goes and does something else, and then she comes back to church going, "Oh, I should maybe try God again now." My goodness, if I had $1 for every girl like that I've seen over the last 15 years make that mistake, it's just crazy. And it's the same mistake every time. It's not like you've never seen anyone else screw up like that before, and it's not like you've ever seen anyone else not do that and have a bad run. Everyone who keeps to God, keeps to the teachings of God, marries a man in the right way, has a phenomenal marriage. You don't look at Imogen and go, "Oh my goodness, she's missing out with Dan. What a horrible man. She's stuck there, this ball and chain, Dan Whalen." Like, no one's look. Everyone's like, "Fantastic, awesome. She's full of life. She's happy." Do you think it'd be better if she's out every Friday night hooking up at a bar with some guy? Do you think she's going to be feeling more Christian, more godly, more at peace? So how do we do it? How do we get ourselves in these pickles? We lie to ourselves. We tell ourselves lies. We blame. We point the finger. We don't take responsibility. Pleasure. Protection. This kind of backs up what I've been saying. God gave you sex in marriage for protection. If I'm having sex with my wife, I'm far less likely to go have sex with someone else. A sexual relationship, it actually protects you from others, and it actually protects my wife, and she protects me from others as well. Paul, the Apostle Paul, says in those passages in Corinthians that if husbands and wives aren't having sex, that is a problem, that is a sin. He says you should only stop having sex if you've committed maybe for a week to pray and fast and focus on God a little bit, and then get back to it. It's looked down on to not have regular sex in marriage. Why? Because it protects, it keeps you together, it keeps you focused, it builds another dimension into your relationship. And thirdly, it's for procreation. It does have a practical benefit. In children, there's a reason sex produces babies, and babies are good, and babies are going to grow your character and make you a better person as well. So this is a challenge for us. Be Christ or compromise and just go with the flow of the world. Be patient or pursue promiscuity. It's really up to you. God doesn't say no to sex. He just says restrain and wait for the right time. Be patient. Nothing sets Christianity apart like sexual purity, secure singleness, being secure and okay with the fact that you're single. That shines such a light into the world. If you're okay with being single, not just single, but you're okay with being single, that is a phenomenal testimony. Who's had people before amazed that you're not in a relationship, that you're not having sex all the time, that you're not hooking? Yeah, because it's already a light that shines in the darkness. But if you're not secure in it and you're hiding it and you're embarrassed of it, well, that's not going to work well. And also Christian courtship, so powerful. When you do things God's way and not the worldly dating way, it has a huge impact on people's lives. What I want to do as we finish off today and we finish off this conference, what I really feel to do is just to give you an opportunity to spend a few minutes with the Holy Ghost, with God on this particular area. I don't know if we could just put some music on, just some little bit of background music. But what I want to give you a chance to do, if you want to, you can put those buckets out here. We've just got a few buckets here, and just if you want to just come and just wash your face. Just wash your face as kind of a sign or a way of saying to God, I just want to be clean in this area. I don't want to give in. I don't want to compromise. I don't want to be promiscuous. I don't want to do it the world's way. I want to wash all that away. The sin, the thoughts, the lust, the errors. I want to wash all that away. And I don't just want to try and be good like Pastor Caleb's saying, or be Christian only, but I want to be a light that shines in the darkness. You need, and I haven't made a big point of this, but you need evidence for why you don't have sex before marriage. Not just the Bible told me so, or Jesus doesn't want me to. Okay, that doesn't sound very good when you're chatting to your mates over a beer. Well, I don't have sex because Jesus doesn't want me to. I'm married to Jesus. Okay, like, you got to have evidence. Well, why not? You got to have logic. Well, why not? Why is it better not to? And that's what I've tried to give you today. And pointing to things like, well, I believe in God, and I believe that He has a purpose for these things. So I take them more seriously than just sex with anyone, anytime, anywhere. Oh, okay, that's interesting. You got to have some lines. You got to have some evidence. You got to have a reason for the hope that you have in the sexual purity teaching of the Bible. You're going to look more stupid, not because you're not having sex or not hooking up. You're going to look more stupid if you can't even explain why you're not doing that. If you're embarrassed because you're a Christian, you don't have sex and don't hook up with people, then that's a problem, and that's going to look stupid. You've got to be confident that, no, I've thought this through. This is actually a better way. Yeah, I don't get pleasure now. I get patience now. I don't get whatever I want now. I have to show a bit of restraint for a couple of years. But man, this makes total sense. I'm thinking about an awesome marriage. I'm thinking about kids. I'm thinking about the future. I'm thinking about, do you want to be sexually fulfilled and enjoy having sex one day? Well, God's way is the way to do it. He knows best. The most sexually fulfilled, sexually satisfied person on the face of the earth is middle-aged Christian women. You look at the statistics. You look at the statistics. Middle-aged Christian women are the most satisfied sexually people on the face of the earth. Not 19-year-old dudes out at a nightclub picking up chicks. They don't even know what they're doing. That's why they're out there doing that, because they have no idea about women or sex or anything. All my mates who are promiscuous and have run around and chased girls and all of that, none of them have ended up happy. None of them are thankful that they did that. And you know what? In the long run, I've had more sex than all of them anyway. Because I have a wife and I have sex regularly with my wife. So I may have been a virgin when I got married, but I've had more sex with them now in the long run anyway, and better, and with someone that I love, not in the back of some dirty car at 3 a.m. in the morning somewhere. Disgusting. That middle-aged Christian woman, she's secure. She's been married for 25 years. Her and her husband have worked out the sex thing, so that it's not like their first year of marriage. They've actually worked it out now. And she's secure. Emotionally, mentally, physically, she's secure. She's secure in her God. She's secure in her husband. And so she's fulfilled. And she's not afraid to have sex. She's not afraid to be intimate with her husband. And she's fulfilled. She's happy. She's satisfied. You think porn stars are the most happy, sexually fulfilled people? No way. We've got that last slide there. Oh, do we not have a last slide? Is there another slide? Just last scripture, write this one down. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 9 and 10. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 9 and 10. Or do you not know that wrongdoers will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived, neither the sexually immoral, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor men who have sex with men, nor thieves, nor the greedy, nor drunkards, nor slanderers, nor swindlers will inherit the kingdom of God. If you're fooling around sexually, you will not inherit the kingdom of God. And that doesn't necessarily mean you won't go to heaven, but it just means that you're not going to live under the anointing of heaven. You're not going to see the kingdom come in your earthly life. You're not going to see the grace and the calling on your life work out. If you're getting drunk, if you're fooling around sexually, if you're putting things like money or looks or whatever as an idol, if you're thieving and greedy, if you're slandering and speaking against people and criticizing and judging and gossiping, all of these things stop the kingdom of heaven coming in your life. And that is what some of you were. But you were washed, you were sanctified, you were justified in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ and by the Spirit of our God. You have been washed by the blood of Jesus. So this morning, as you come, I want you to spend a moment. I don't care if you take 20 minutes out here at the bucket, all right? We've put out 6, so we should have enough time for everyone. But I don't mind if you take a few minutes. I just want you to, like Jesus did when he died for you and you committed your life to him. He washed you. He washed you with his blood. He made you clean. He made you white as snow. I want you to just come, just wash your face. Wash your hands, whatever you feel to do, just as a sign of saying, I'm going to be clean in this area. When I go out into the culture, it's not to compromise, but it's to actually show a model, a Christian worldview, to show that I get sex, gender, marriage, family, that there's a purpose in this. So I want to be clean in this area. I want to represent God in this area. You might need to do some repenting. Do it. You've all committed adultery in your heart, I can guarantee you. You've all lusted in your heart, wanting and coveting some man or some woman at some point. That's what you've wanted. So just get it clean, get it right. Say it out loud, admit it to God, clean your heart. Some of you have got sexual activity, things from the past, childhood, promiscuity, things you've been involved in, kissing, hookups, whatever, and they still linger there. just clean them away, wash them away, just hand them over to God. Porn, looking at girls the wrong way, looking at girls in the wrong spot, whatever, hoping, putting all your future ladies on some guy liking you or texting you or being interested in you. Just wash it away. Just deal with it. Just let it go. Okay? Just give us about 10, 15 minutes to do that. Don't be afraid. I'm not going to be looking at you going, oh my goodness, so-and-so's out there. Just come out. It's cool. I don't care what you're coming out for, but God does. Just get your heart right with him. It's been you and him. And remember, this is a battle, this area. Washing your face today is not going to make you never struggle in this area again. It's not some magic potion that, awesome, now I'm going to go out of here and porn's never going to be a problem. Of course, you're still going to be tempted. It's still going to be a battle. But these lines in the sand kind of times where we draw a line, make a commitment are important. So just encourage you to come and do that. Can we just pop some music on and let's just take a moment. I really believe God's going to move on some of you really powerfully. You might just want to spend a moment with God in your chair first. So great. Come right out. 5 or 6, the first 5 or 6. Just come out and go for it.